This conference will now be recorded.
Very good morning and good evening, guys. We are actually, entering into uh, the state where we are understanding, right, how we are going to make use of the infrastructure that we are creating on the AWS cloud to run our business. So that is where we are discussing about how we can deploy the web services on the EC2 instance and how the end users accessing the web services through the public internet space, correct? So here, when I use a terminology called end user, is mean that the one who actually consuming the services, or the one who actually go through our website and utilizing the services. It could be purchasing a product, it could be utilizing the content, it could be right watching the videos or whatever. What is the service that I'm offering through my website, right? The users can consume the same, correct? So to run that website, yes, we have seen that the EC2 instance is the one which is holding the required code and the required the packages and the services which are listening on the a specific port, correct? So I think let me continue the same discussion. Today, I just wanted to recap the presentation one more time to understand how the Apache works. Okay, so the intention, right? The user should able to browse a website by going through his browser, correct? So the user or a client, right? Here the a web browser is acting as a client for my Apache server, and in the browser the user has to type uh, the 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 website name that he has to browse through. So the requirement here is I'm taking a EC2 instance in the AWS cloud. That EC2 instance I'm going to configure as a web server now. When I say web server, if you install and configure Apache HTTP a web server software, then that server is now called as a web server. Okay, why this server is configured as a uh, or to serve the web services to the clients on the port number 80 by default, correct? So in order to make it as a web server, right, as we seen yesterday, we need to install Apache HTTPD web server package using the yum command, and you need to keep the HTML code, and maybe you can even keep the data that you wanted to serve to the users. Even yesterday I have shown you only one line of the text, right? But it could be, right, I can keep the images, text, videos, files, anything I can keep in my server side based on the requirement, what type of the website that it is and what services that it is offering, right? So all this stuff now I can put into the web server. So the web server has its own IP address, and that is the IP that the client has to use in their browser to access the website. That is what we seen yesterday. Now the really, yeah, thank you, on mute. Really, right, the client will never be using the IP address to access the web services, correct? The client always expects that the web services are browsable through a domain name or a website name. Yesterday I have shown you http colon slash slash IP address, correct? But now I don't want to use the IP to access the website. I want to use a domain. Domain is the new terminology that I'm using today. Domain, the website name is kind of same. The website name is just a general language. The domain is very specific to the technical, right? So here the client want to access the website using, let's say, www.veloxy.com, something like that. When the client is using the domain name to access the services, the request should go to the web server. The web server side, there is a port which is listening on, correct? So the request should be sent to a port number 80, and of course the web services can work on 443 as well. We will see that 443 port number later time, but as of now we have seen that the Apache web server listen on port number 80. The client has to send the request to the port number 80, then the uh, HTTPD service which is running and listening on 80 will be responding back to the client. When it is responding, we have seen that it will be picking up the default code base from the default document root folder where www.html location. The default file that it picks up is the index.html, and that will be giving the response to the client, and that will be showing you as a web page by the web browsers. So in this particular discussion, the question is, how come when a client is hitting www.avalaxy.com, the request is going to the server? If the client is using the IP, and we know that the request will go to the server because that IP is actually configured on that particular EC2 server, that is clear. But the puzzle here is, the client is using a name, and how come that name is now pointing to this particular EC2 server? That is what we are going to solve for today, right? So to get into that domain specific discussion, so first I will be creating an EC2 server quickly. I will configure the web server. Okay, then we'll proceed with the domain discussion, and we'll see how the domains will be configured to access the web services. So I'm just launching a new instance today because the instance that was used in a previous session is terminated, just to avoid the unnecessary running time. So I'm just quickly creating an instance with the default choices. Probably I need a port number 80 as well to be allowed in the security in groups instance and attach the existing key pair. So I got an instance ready. So let me take this instance and let me take the IP address of this instance and logging into the server to configure this server as a web server. So as of now, I have taken a instance from the default AMI. I mean to say the AWS provided AMI. So this instance will not come with the predefined uh, things. If it is a custom AMI, then you can expect all these things are pre-configured, but this is not a custom golden AMI. The golden AMI that I have created in a previous session is now deregistered. Why? So as part of the free tier, right, you will be getting only 1 GB capacity to store the snapshots. So if that is exceeding, it will be billable. So as much as possible, right, I used to clean up the resources the moment when we done with this. It's a best practice. Of course, not in the real time, right, but at least during the learning time. Well, so now I wanted to configure this instance as a web server. I just need to done yum install httpd. Well, this is done. Now service httpd start, service httpd status, netstat-tupln just to see the port status, what it is currently after the web server is in a running state. I could see that the port number 80 is now listened by the HTTPD service. This is great. Now, if you go to var www.html, why I need to go to var www.html, guys? Because that is the default location where the web server is looking for the code. Who said that this is the default location to go and pick up the code? So as I said, there is a the configuration file, right? So Apache has its own configuration file in the Apache home directory under the conf location. So this is the httpd.conf file. So if you open this conf file, the configuration file has the details how the Apache should work. This file is stating that etc httpd is the server root directory, that means the home directory, and the Apache should listen on port number 80. If I do still scroll down, right, we could see that yeah, maybe I can even search for this. You can see the document root folder. So because the document root folder is var www.html mentioned in the configuration file of the Apache, by default it looks for this location to pick up the code. And if you want, you can change it, but usually you don't do that. So I'm not doing any changes to this config. I am just explaining that how the default settings are mentioned in the configuration file. If you want, you can do the tweakings as well, but here the intention is just to understand how the web servers are working, right? So now I just want to go to var www.html and let me create a index.html, and this is where I'm putting my HTML code. So this is my sample website. So as of now, I'm showing a website with one-liner, guys, but later I'll show you the real-time website deployment. Okay, I don't want to go to the the state, right, where we deploy the real-time website directly. So let's have a basics first. It's done. Now let me try to access this website, guys. So I'll just go to the browser and I'll just give this IP address, and yes, it is working. Now the next discussion is how a end user can access the website using the domain name rather using the IP address. So in order to work with the domain name concept, we need to understand a new concept called DNS. So the DNS, domain naming system. Okay, so the DNS is the concept which will help you to use the domain name in the browser, right, to access the web services rather using the IP address. So we'll discuss about this DNS now. I have a client who want to access the web services through the website name or a domain name, and the website is already hosted in the EC2 instance, and the web services are now being served by the Apache HTTPD web server software, and it has its own IP address. So now the user is hitting www.veloxy.com, and the name has to be resoluted into the IP address, correct? So once this name is resoluted into the IP, then the request can hit on that specific IP address. That's how the server can receive. But here the problem is when the user is using the name, how that name will be converted into the IP address. That is where the client, when hitting this domain name on the browser, it is sending the request to the DNS server. So there is a DNS server, the domain naming system server. The DNS server is responsible to give the resolution for the queries that is being asked by the client. That means when a client is sending the request, what is the IP of www.veloxy.com? That is how the question has been sent to the DNS server. Now it's the DNS server responsibility to give the mapping or the IP of this name. How this DNS server know this information? You should have been feeded this information already in the DNS server level. That means because I know what is my IP address, I will be keeping this IP address information in the DNS server. So stating that, hey DNS server, if you get any request asking for the IP resolution, you just give this IP as an answer. That is how you need to configure the DNS servers. So whenever the request comes in, it just check for the details and it will just give the IP as a answer back to the client. That is how the DNS servers works, right? So when the request sent to the DNS server, sometimes the DNS server may not be having a complete details about this name. Let's say the DNS server to whom I have sent the request, if that DNS server does not have the information about this name, then it cannot provide you the answer. Maybe in this case, maybe the DNS server which I am referring here does not have any data related to this www.veloxy.com. What it do? It will simply forward the request to another DNS server stating, hey, I don't have any information about this name that you are asking. I'm just forwarding this information to a one more DNS server which is now being hosted by the AWS Route 53 service. AWS has a one more service called Route 53. Okay, maybe this is the second service that I'm discussing in the AWS. AWS Route 53 service is the service to give you the domain resolution. So the request is being forwarded to the AWS Route 53. In the AWS Route 53, you might be having the details as the zone information is veloxy.com, right? In this www.veloxy.com, the veloxy.com is called as a domain name or hosted zone. Both are same, guys. Based on where we are using this name, right? The term will be little changing, but both are same. So from the Route 53 perspective, the terminology is hosted zone. So whenever the request is hit on the AWS Route 53, the AWS Route 53 will be checking, hey, do I have the hosted zone or not with me? So in the request, the hosted zone is veloxy.com. So it will check internally whether do I have that hosted zone or not. If that hosted zone is found, then it check for the records that are there for that hosted zone. So the resource record, in the sense, the information that you are providing to that particular hosted zone. You see here the way how I am, putting the resource record information. Here I mentioned that the resource name is www. The resource value is the IP address of my EC2 server. So whenever the request come to Route 53, the Route 53 will first check for the question. The question is all about www.veloxy.com. In that, the domain name or the zone name is veloxy.com. So first it check for whether that zone is there or not. If the zone is there, then it check for the resource information. In this, the www is called as a resource name. So it check for the resource name. Okay, the www resource is found. So the www dot the hosted zone, www dot the veloxy.com. The answer is so and so IP. That IP will be giving as a answer back to the requester. In this case, who is requester? The requester is the another DNS server, correct? So that response is given back to the DNS server, and this DNS server is giving the same response back to the client. That is how now my client has got a IP address of this name. When the client is getting this IP address, then the client will be hitting on the web server, right? Because he know what is the IP that he has to hit to get the web services. Now the web server can respond back to you. So that is how the web pages are loaded. So you as a client, when you are browsing a web services from your browser using a website name, this DNS resolution will be happening automatically in the backend. You will not be knowing that this is how it is working. But yes, the client here, the browser is the client, is sending the request to the DNS servers to get the resolution. Once it get the resolution, once it know that what is the IP that it has to hit, then only the request will be hit on the web server's case. So the client need not to worry about the IP now, correct? Because the client is only bother about the name of the domain or a website name. The name is converted into the IP in the backend with the help of the DNS concept. And here the AWS Route 53 is the service that is providing these DNS services for you. Well, so there are some puzzles here. If the AWS Route 53 is the service which is responsible to give the resolution of the specific resource record of this hosted zone, then why I need to have one more DNS server in between, correct? Obviously. So let's say this is the public domain where this domain will be accessible by entire world. Okay. So let's say if there are some lakh number of people are accessing this website around the globe. So do you think every request will go to the AWS Route 53 to get the resolution? That is very tricky, right? So the AWS Route 53 will be very busy to handle the resolutions of the multiple people across the globe. The users may get a latency issues. Maybe the Route 53 will become very busy in responding to all of the requests across the globe. So there are n number of reasons why, right? We cannot use the Route 53 directly to get the resolution. What will happen is whenever the client is trying to browse the internet, I mean to say the website, the client has its own ISP, right? ISP in the sense the internet service provider. Let's say the client has got a internet connectivity from the respective service provider. Could be a Airtel, could be a Vodafone, could be any other. There are n number of internet service providers are available in the market. So the client is registered for any one of the internet service provider. The every internet service provider has their own DNS server, which is also called as a local DNS server. So if I have got an internet connectivity to my system, I will be using the local DNS server, which is being maintained by the internet service providers. So when the client is hitting a name on that particular, I mean to say, when the client is hitting the name in the browser to get the services, first the request will be sent to the local DNS server, which is managing by your internet service provider. If that local DNS server is not having the details about your particular domain name that you are looking for, then that will be forwarding the request to the AWS Route 53, which is the main DNS servers where the actual resource records are hosted. The advantage here is the very first time when the client is sending the request to the local DNS server, this is forwarding the request to the Route 53. When the Route 53 is responding the answer for this question back to the local DNS server, this DNS server will be keeping the information as a cache. That means it stores that information locally. The advantage is next time after 5 minutes, let's say, the client is hitting that domain name again in the browser. Again, he need a IP address, right? So this time the request will be sent to the local DNS Yeah, so please do confirm, guys. I see there is a small glitch in the audio. If you're able to hear me now, just to confirm. Thank you. So yes means what, you are able to or not. Yeah, it's clear now. Thank you. Right. So the advantage is when the second time the client is using the same name, the request will go to the local DNS server. The local DNS server can respond back to the client without forwarding the request to the Route 53. Why? The local DNS server is holding that information as a cache in it. So that way we can avoid sending every request to the main Route 53 or main DNS server. So most of the requests will be get resoluted by the local DNS servers itself, as those are maintaining the cache in the server itself. Right? That definitely improve the performance and less latency, and we avoid the load on the main DNS servers as well. That's how it is. So I'm explaining the concept how the public domain name will be resoluted into the IP, but we don't need to worry about how this local DNS server works, because that is something will be managing by the internet service providers. Correct. So we will be responsible in maintaining the Route 53. So we need to go to Route 53. There we need to create a hosted zone, and we need to create a resource record stating that for which resource record, what is the value that it has to respond.
Hey,
The
PR,
rest of
one
the
question. Actually, since like we are using AWS services, so that's why we are using Route 53, right? What if happen that if I'm not using AWS services and I'm a local client and I wanna just serve something, so then how DNS server comes into picture without this AWS service Route 53?
Mhm.
Because
so
DNS would work in that way as well, right?
mhm. So those will be covered. Okay, so I think in my delivery that will be picked up. Yep, thanks for the question. Yeah, that will be covered as well, right?
Here I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Here the user is sending the URL to the DNS server, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the DNS server, uh, if the particular URL doesn't have any information related to this URL, then it will go to Route 53.
Mm-hmm.
And there we need here they are telling us hosted zone as well, xc.com and resource. Who are going to generate this resource code route 53 itself, or we need to create the resource code and resource type and value?
That is where we need to wait, right? So the delivery will be, I will be giving you the explanation about the concept, then I will be jumping onto the practical, right? When I'm doing the
Okay.
practical, I'll be showing how to configure this entire stuff, correct?
Oh,
So that is where, yeah, we need to wait until I jump on to the practical session and doing this complete execution, right? Well, so that is the advantage of having the local DNS servers, which are maintaining by the respective internet service providers, which I don't really care. All what I worry is how do I maintain the DNS information in my Route 53 if I am using AWS as a domain resolution, right? So here I just wanted to talk about something. Even the local DNS server is the one which is responsible to give the resolution for the name that you are provided. Even the DNS which is managing by the Route 53 is also responsible in giving the resolution for the question being asked, correct? So just to give the differentiation here, the DNS server which is managing by internally or locally is called as a local DNS server or forwarder DNS server or caching DNS server. That is how the different names are being given for these name servers based on the way how that is handling the resolution, which will be controlling with the internet service provider. But the name server, the DNS in short, I will call as a name server, guys. Okay, the name server which is maintaining by the Route 53 is called as a authoritative name server. Authoritative name server in the sense the one which is actually holding the resource records. If you look into this scenario, the local DNS server is not the authoritative name server. Why? That is not holding the resource record information. That is getting the information from the authoritative name servers, and that information will be keeping as a cache in it, and that is giving the response back to the client, right? But this is not the main name server which is responsible to give the information. It always gets the information from authoritative name servers only. So here we need to understand the terminology authoritative name server. The authoritative name server is the main name server where exactly the resource record information is located. All other name servers are not authoritative name server. Those are just a forwarder name server or caching name server or maybe a local name servers which are acting as a intermittent name servers between the client and the actual authoritative name servers to give you some flexibilities. So now to make these things happen, right, I need to go to Route 53. There we need to create a hosted zone and resource record information, and the things will work out. When I jump on to the practical, guys, you will know most of the questions will be answered. Okay, so probably I just have deployed a web server. The web services are now accessible on a specific IP. Now I need my client to access these web services using the name. So let's go and create the required setup on the Route 53 to make the things happen. I'll talk about if it is not Route 53, what will be the case. I'll be bringing in that situation as well in my discussion. As of now, since we are on AWS Cloud to give the infrastructure solutions, so let me get on to the AWS to give this resolutions to configure this. If you go to the services tab, guys, we have seen the EC2 service to create a server. If you do little scroll down, you can see a Route 53 service under the networking section. If I go to Route 53, right? So this is where the DNS management come into the picture, right? Now, before I go and configure the Route 53, right? First, I need to take a decision, right? My website should be accessible through which domain name, correct? In my presentation, I said that www.veloxy.com is the domain, but can I use the same name when I'm doing the actual configuration? So this domain name is the a public domain name, which is right unique. So whenever you are taking a decision that the web services should be accessible through some name, the name should be available for you. So you cannot just go and take whatever the name you like it and configure, it will not work. Why? This is just a unique name across the globe. I mean to say, I cannot configure my Route 53 in such a way that www.facebook.com should point to my server. No, you cannot do that because you are not the owner of the facebook.com domain. So whenever you take a decision that your services should be offered through which domain name, that domain name should be owned by you. So in order to own the domain name, you need to purchase the domain name, right? So if you go to domain name sellers, right? If you go to domain name sellers, there are n number of vendors are available in the market who will help you to purchase a domain name. When you purchase a domain name, then you will become the owner of the domain. Then we will be having the control how to configure the DNS resolution for that specific domain name. You cannot configure whatever the name that you like it, correct? So as these domains are unique in the world, right? These domain vendors, let's say GoDaddy is one of the vendor which who will help you to register a domain. We can see Namecheap, we can see Ions, we can see WP, HostGator, Google as well. There are many, right? You can use any vendor to purchase a domain, not a problem. All these guys are connecting to a single database in the backend to know which name is available for you, right? Now, even AWS also helping you to purchase a domain, because now I'm talking about the AWS. In the AWS Route 53, you can go to the registered domain option here. That is where you need to register a domain first. When you register a domain, you will be the owner and you get a complete access on that domain, how you are planning for the resolutions. Let's say I want to register a domain first. Click on the registration and search for it, right? So there will be like .com, .net, .org, right? There are many. So let's say I want to go for veloxy.com. You see, this particular name is unavailable. That means someone is already registered this name. So now I cannot take this name to configure my web services. I need to take a name which is available, right? Then I'll purchase the domain, then only I can configure my services with that name. That is how we need to check for the availability. Then we need to register for it. So since we are here, right, I can talk about something called Whois database. So there is a website called whois.com, which is also called as a Whois database. This is where we can run or we can search for the domain which will help you who currently registered this domain. this domain is currently unavailable, right? So that means who registered this domain. If you want, you can look for that information as well. This will give you more information, guys. This is the domain, right? This domain is registered on 2014. This domain is registered through this particular vendor. This guy is called as a domain registrar. Okay, what does it mean by registrar? The one who registered this domain, I meant to say the vendor, right? It could be a GoDaddy, it could be AWS, it could be any other. Who has registered this domain for you? That guy is called as a domain registrar, and you can see the name server information. So these are the servers, right? These are the servers which are actually storing the information about this domain. These servers are actually maintaining by these domain registers. Okay, so from this name servers only the resolutions will be happening. Now you can see the register contact, and you can see the details who actually registered this domain. These are the details about the one who purchased this domain on so and so date. So we get more information about the domain, right, from the WHOIS database, guys. Right, we can even see their contact number here, not here, somewhere, right? Of course, it's up to them if they want to elevate their contact or not, but we can get more details about the domain from the WHOIS database. Okay, so this WHOIS database will help you to understand the domain register at least. Okay, so now tell me, guys, in the chat window, if I am using this veloxy.com in my browser, the request will go to whom? Forget about these local DNS servers. I don't care. I only care about the authoritative name servers. That means who is responsible to give you the resolution for this particular domain name, right? So in this case, the name Silo, right? This is the company who is the domain register, right? So this company is responsible to give the resolution for this domain name because I purchased, I in the sense whatever, right? I taken this as an example, right? So this domain name resolution will be happen through this particular domain register. These guys are able to do that through these name servers because the information is stored into these name servers. So these are called as a authoritative name servers. Same way, right? The domain you may get it from any vendor. Okay, let's say I'll go to the domain called, cloudcourse.com. So the cloudcourse.com is unavailable. If I look into the WHOIS database, now you see the cloudcourse.com, who is the domain register. In this case, the domain register is the GoDaddy company, and these are the authoritative name servers for this, right? The domain. Now tell me, guys, if someone is using this domain name, the request will go to whom? The request will go to GoDaddy asking for the resolution. So it's a GoDaddy responsibility, as GoDaddy is the registrar for this domain, to give you the the resolution based on the request that you provide. That is how it is. Now, if you are purchasing a domain from the AWS, then AWS will become the domain registrar. Then the request will go to the AWS authoritative name servers to get the resolution. That is how it works. Now, the domain registration is not part of the free tier, guys. So you must pay the domain cost. Why? This is not something limited to the AWS level, right? This is something where they are blocking this name in the globe level, right? or I would say, right, it is in a public internet space, this name is blocked for you, so we need to pay for it, right? So now whenever, if you get a domain available, for example, then we can add that particular domain to the cart, and AWS says it is around $12 per year. So right, if you're happy about this, then we can just click on continue, then the domain will be purchased. I'm not doing that now. Okay, if you purchase a domain, then the domain related information will be created for you. As of now, I will cancel this because I don't want to purchase a domain now. If you purchase a domain, then the domain related information will be created as a hosted zone. You just click on the hosted zone here, correct? If you click on the hosted zone, you can see the domain name here. If you purchase a domain from the AWS, then the domain information will be available under the hosted zone. Now, let's say I purchased the domain called cloudcourse.com, then I will be the owner of the domain, right? And the domain information is created as a hosted zone. And if I click on this particular hosted zone name, this is where it will allow you to manage the resource records. Sometime back I given the discussion, right? In the AWS Route 53, there should be a hosted zone. That hosted zone will be, even you have purchased the domain, then you need to maintain the resource records, how the resolution should happen, right? So now if you go back to your Route 53 hosted zone, right, and you can see there are two, there are two records already, and here you can see the record name, the type, and the value here, guys. You can see the type as NS is mean that the name servers information, and you can see there are 4 name servers are available. These 4 name servers are now called as a authoritative name servers, who are actually storing the information about your domain. These name servers will be giving the response back to you whenever someone is requesting for it, right? We don't need to worry about how this name servers works, who is maintaining, how it is being maintaining, because the AWS is the service provider, they know how to do that, right? So now you see there is a one more is called as a SOA. SOA in the sense the state of authority. The authority is being given to which name server. You see the value, if you look at ns-2027, this is the same name what you see in the name servers, guys, right? So that means as of now this is the primary name server, these are the secondary name servers. Why? If for some reason, think of like these are 4 different servers in the backend where the AWS is managing, okay? If for some reason if this server is down, then there are few more servers which will help you to do the resolution. That is how they in the sense the domain registers will be managing the high availability. So as of now, this is the primary name server, which is now called as a authoritative name server. So that is how the AWS is maintaining in the backend. We usually, right, we don't do anything with this information. All what is my requirement is, whenever someone is hitting www dot the domain name, in my case www.cloudcourse.com, that has to hit on my EC2 server. So you need to just create a record, click on create a record. This is how the form will be open for you to create a resource record. the resource record name that you need to mention here. Let's say www.thecloudcourse.com. If that is the resource information, then the value, this is where we need to give the IP address to which IP it has to be resoluted. In my case, so this is the IP that I wanted to do the resolution, right? This is my EC2 IP. So let me give that IP here. Correct. Forget about the remaining options for now. I am concentrating that www dot the domain name is pointing to this IP. That is what I'm looking for. Just click on create a record. Now you see there is a resource record is created here stating that the www.thecloudcourse.com is now pointing to this IP address. From now on, whoever is using this domain name, right, that will be converted into this IP. That IP is my EC2 server IP. The request go to my server and the website will be loaded from there. I can just go to the browser now. You see now www.thecloudcourse.com. Hit enter. This is where you can see the same website what you have seen in the IP base. Now either you use the IP, you use the domain name, both are pointing to the same server, you are getting the same website, guys. The only thing what is happening when I'm using this name, right, this is sending the request to the name servers, right, to the DNS servers to get the resolution. The DNS servers will be giving the response, right, and with that response it is connecting to that particular EC2 servers to get the web page. If you are interested in, let's say, as per the concept, right, the client is hitting a website name and able to get the website, but in the backend the client is sending the request to the ISP provided DNS server. If that does not have the information, that is sending to the domain registrar, right, the answer will come through the authoritative name server. All these are happening in the backend now. The internet service provider know exactly the request should send to whom because of the domain registrar information in the WHOIS database. All will happen in the backend, guys. Let's say even in my case, I'm using the Windows system as of now, right? Let's say I want to know what is the DNS server IP where my request is go. If I go to my command prompt in the Windows, let's say, just to give you the things, ipconfig/all is the command in the Windows. It will tell you the information about your DNS. Don't worry about this command, I'm just giving you to get more insight. You see somewhere DNS servers 192.168.0.1. This is the IP address of the local DNS server. Okay, so when I use this domain name in the browser, first the request will go to this IP. This is my local DNS server, and that will take care of routing that to the authoritative name servers, the domain registers, whatever, that the ISP will know what to do later. So all what we need to do is maintain your resource record information in the Route 53 in the hosted zone, and that will be resoluted to the entire globe publicly. So, but only thing is we should purchase a domain name to do that. Then only you will be the owner to manage the resource record information of that particular domain name in the respective authoritative name servers. Now, this is great. I'm slowly, guys, taking you guys towards the real time, how the web services works in the real time. right? Now let's say, as per the question that I got it in some time back, what is the case if my domain register is not AWS? My domain is purchased from GoDaddy, let's say. Here I have shown you how to manage the resource records of the domain if the domain is within the AWS Route 53. But what is the case if my domain is in GoDaddy? It could be anywhere, right? There are multiple vendors out there. So let's say I'm taking you guys to the GoDaddy here. Okay, so that is where I'll show you that process as well now. I have got an account already in GoDaddy and I have got many domains as well that I purchased. So I will use any one of the domain to do that setup. So here I have many domains with my name. I mean to say I am the owner of these domains, right? So the GoDaddy will be the domain registrar, right? Whichever the domain that you want to use for your business need, and you just need to go to that domain and configure it. Let's say yeah, I'll take this domain. There is something called maybe I'll take this. I think it's fine. Maybe $5.com is there. I just click on manage this domain. Right, only when you have purchased the domain you will be able to manage the resource record of this particular domains. So I want to manage the DNS, right? So this is where now you can see for this particular domain I can see the resource record information here. Now we need to update this resource record information accordingly. And you see the name servers, guys. These are the GoDaddy name servers which are now the authoritative name servers for this domain, right? We can see the NS as well. These are the authoritative name servers. We can see the SOA as well, which is the primary name server out of the two available name servers. So now if I want to use this domain to get the web services accessible from my EC2 server, I just need to update this IP address there. So maybe I'll just go to this existing record because the record is already there. So I'm just editing it. So www dot the domain name should be pointing to this particular IP. That is what we can add a record here. Right, so that means the domain could be from any domain register. You just go there and create a resource record. That's it. It will be taken care. It need not to be the domain should be on AWS only. When you are creating a resource record information, guys, and you can see the type here, right? As of now I am using the type called A. There are other types as well. I'll talk about the types bit later. As of now I am using the type A, hence it is called as a record. That means currently I am creating a record. The record name is www. The record type, sorry, the value is so and so IP. Click on save. So www, let me try to save. DNS rules violation. There may be something else as well here. CNAME. So don't worry, there will be a conflict with other things. Okay, so I just removed the conflict one. Now I could see that the record is created. From now on, www dot, this is the domain name, right? That is pointing to this IP address. I'll just go to the browser www dot the $5.com, right? Hit enter. So now we should get the same website. Why? Now the www.$5.com, www.cloudcourse.com, both are pointing to the same EC2 server. Why? That is how I have managed the resource records here, just for understanding the concept. Now you can understand, right? So the domain register is not the matter. Wherever the domain is registered, there you need to just manage your resource records, mentioning which resource record type, the resource record name, and the value that it has to be resoluted. So if you are really interested in doing this practice as well with your own domain, you need to get a domain from your favorite domain register. Then we can update the resource records there accordingly, so that we can access your website through the name itself. I hope this has resolved most of the questions that you have, right? Now let me take a strong breath and have a discussion about the record types. This is very a small discussion, guys. We don't need to worry about all of the types. We just need to worry about only two types, right? So when you are creating a resource record in the domain register to store in the authoritative name servers, I'm just using these terminologies frequently so that you guys will get the familiarity, right? So this is how it is, right? I have the client, I have the Route 53 hosted zone, or it could be a GoDaddy, not a problem. Wherever you have the registered domain, right? There you need to create a records. So now I have a record. The A record is the one which is resoluting the name to the IP address. Okay. There is something called a CNAME record as well. The CNAME record is the one which is you know resoluting a name to another name, right? So these are the two important resource record names, guys. We'll talk about that now. Let's say I have two records in my hosted zone. One is the A record, one is the CNAME record. A record states that www.veloxy.com should be a IP address. CNAME record states that test, right? That means test.veloxy.com is now pointing to www.veloxy.com. Now we'll see how it works. The client is hitting www.veloxy.com on his browser. The request is sent to the local DNS server. The local DNS server is actually forwarding the request to the domain register, as it does not have the information about this. Now the domain registrar will check for, okay, do I have the hosted zone? If yes, then do I have the resource records matching to this? In this case, the resource record name is www. So it check for www. Yeah, www is found. The answer of this is so and so IP. That IP will be given as a answer. The same IP will be given to the client. The client can make a request to the server. Then finally the web page is loaded. That is what we have seen some time back. Now let's say the client is using a test.veloxy.com. Again, same process. The request is sent to the DNS server. It is forwarding the request to the authoritative name servers from the domain registrar. Now the Route 53 will be checking whether do I have the veloxy.com hosted zone. If yes, it check for the resource record. What is the name of the resource record? The name is test. It check for the test name. Okay, the resource name test is found. The value is www.veloxy.com, correct? So that means what? The Route 53 is now responding back with the answer. The answer is what? The answer is www.veloxy.com. If you see here, the question is a name. The answer is also a name, correct? That means if one name is now getting resoluted into another name, that is called as a CNAME record. We can even consider this as a alias record, guys. One name can have multiple names, right? That is how we used to say a aliasing. So here the test.veloxy.com is now aliasing to a www.veloxy.com. That's why the Route 53 is responding that, hey, the test.veloxy.com is converted into or resoluted into www.veloxy.com. That will be give answer. The same answer will be given to the client. Do you think now the client can connect it to the web server? No, right? Because the client is posted a question that, hey, what is the IP of test.veloxy.com? The client has got an answer, but the answer is not the IP. The answer is another name. Now the client will be sending a request again to the DNS server. Hey, I got the response as www.veloxy.com, but I need IP. Can you tell me what is the IP of this name? Again, the request will go to the domain registrar. This time the question is www.veloxy.com. The answer will be a IP address. The IP will be given back to the client, and now the client can connect it to the web server to get the website. If you can closely observe this, whether the client is using www.veloxy.com or the client is using a test.veloxy.com, in both cases the client will be hitting on the same server, yes or no. Right? So that is means these two are now called as a alias records or the CNAME records. So that means a record is mean that the name will be resoluted into a IP. CNAME record is mean that a name will be resoluted into another name. Mostly in real time, right? You will be having some aliasings. Okay, so multiple names will be pointing to the same web server. So we can create a CNAME record for that. Right now, you guys need to purchase only the domain name. For that domain, we can create a multiple resource records, multiple subdomains. You don't need to purchase that. Only the main domain veloxy.com is the one which you need to register. Keeping that in mind, let's say I have a domain in Route 53, correct? Now it could be Route 53 or it could be GoDaddy, wherever your domain is there. You can create a record, the record type, right? You can see the record type can be chosen as CNAME. Now let's say mail.cloudcourse.com should be pointing to www. Right, cloudcourse.com. So that is how you can create a CNAME records, guys. So the mail.cloudcourse.com, www.cloudcourse.com, both will be pointing to the same endpoint. Now you can see the way how the CNAME record look like. The question will be a name, the answer will be a name. Now if you go to the browser, right, now you just try to access mail.cloudcourse.com, right? You should get the same website. You see, it's the same website. Your domain is different now. Internally, it is actually pointing to the same IP because of the CNAME concept or the aliasing concept. The use cases we'll see later as well, how exactly the CNAME will be helpful in real time. As of now, understanding this concept will be good enough. I think I have a time to discuss about a small scenario. Let's say I have an EC2 instance, okay, which is already created in my AWS, as the AWS is my infrastructure provider. But unfortunately, my domain is already registered in the GoDaddy, correct? So if I want to manage my resource record information, every time I need to come to GoDaddy, correct? I think I'll not happy with that. Why? So I need to do something on AWS. I need to come to GoDaddy to do my DNS update, but the domain is already registered in the GoDaddy. It is possible to do the right. It is possible to do the DNS forwarding. Okay, that means let it be my DNS. Sorry, let it be my domain registered in GoDaddy, but I wanted to manage my resource records from the AWS. I'll talk about that now. That means in this case, the $5.com is something registered in the GoDaddy, and I could see the records as well here. I could see the name servers which are now authoritative by the GoDaddy. For some reason, I want to manage this domain from the AWS, though I'm not purchasing this domain from AWS. So it will be just a flexibility, guys. So I need not to come to GoDaddy to edit these records. What you can do is, in the Route 53, you can go to the hosted zones. You can create a hosted zone manually. Okay. Usually the hosted zone will be created automatically for you if you have purchased the domain from the AWS. If not, you can create a hosted zone manually by clicking on create a hosted zone. Specify the hosted zone name, which is the same domain that you wanted to manage. This is the public hosted zone. Create it. What will happen is, now if you see under the hosted zone, there are two hosted zones. The $5.com, if you go inside, you can see that the name servers are automatically created for you. These are the name servers are now acting as a authoritative name servers for this domain in the AWS. But do you think when the client is using a $5.com domain, do you think the request come to the AWS directly? Yes or no? No, right? Why? The domain register is GoDaddy. Always the request go to GoDaddy. Now I need to inform to GoDaddy. Hey GoDaddy, you are the domain register for this. Whenever you get a request for this domain, can you please forward the request to the AWS name servers? That is how we need to manage. So in the GoDaddy, I'll go to my domain name. In the domain name, I can see my name servers. Here, I need to do the change. I want to go with my own name servers to manage this domain name. This is where we need to update the name servers of AWS. So these are the name servers of the AWS. Take it, fill it here. and this is my second name server of this domain in the AWS. Fill it here. This is the third name server of this domain. Add it here. And this is the fourth name server. Let me add it here and save this information. What I'm doing is I'm updating the AWS name servers in the GoDaddy, right? So that whenever the request comes to the GoDaddy, as it is the domain register, the GoDaddy will identify that the information is not within the GoDaddy maintaining name servers, the information available in the AWS. So the request will be routed to the AWS name servers. That is how you can access the or you can manage the resource records in the AWS only. You see now in the GoDaddy, I'm not seeing any resource record information. I cannot create a record now. Okay, so if you come down, now the name servers are different. You see, this domain is now being maintained by these name servers. These are the AWS name servers. So if you want to do any changes to the resource records, you need to do in AWS only. That is how you can manage the DNS right in the AWS itself, though the domain is taken from the different vendors, right? In this case, I have created a hosted zone, right? And AWS is responsible to store the information in the respective name servers. So this hosted zone is cost you $0.5 per month, right? So that is the charging that will be for a hosted zone. So it's very minimal, but again, it's up to you if you wanted to bear that. But this is $0.5 per month is the charging for managing this hosted zone in the AWS site, right? So that means when you get into the real time, obviously every project has their own business where the business is running on the respective domain. We need to understand the domain is purchased from which vendor. So who is the domain register? That is what we need to look at. And sometimes the domain register could be a GoDaddy, but the records are being maintained by the AWS, correct? As I did just now. So we need to understand who is the domain register. Then we need to understand these resource records are being maintained where. Then going forward, when you get any new request asking you to add a record or CNAME record, you can easily go to that location and can create a records there, guys. It's your responsibility to manage the resource records. Mostly, okay, registering a domain, updating this name servers, right? As I did sometime back, right? I have added this name servers in the GoDaddy. Those things will not be done by you because that is the major change. So you will not get the access to do that in the real time, right? So that is already been set up. You will be the responsible to manage the resource records, like adding a record, a CNAME record, maybe deleting the records when it is not required. Those operations that you will be doing from the right the DNS site. That is how the traffic will be routed to your servers, guys. I think this is cool. Now, in next 5 minutes time, right, I wanted to utilize, like, let's say, let's say I have done everything good, but how do I know that this is working or not? Let's say you are going to a browser, you are, you know, looking for something, right? Maybe it is not working. You see, why it is not working? What could be the reason? How do you troubleshoot? there are certain DNS related commands are there. Those commands will help you, right, to solve the DNS related issues, guys. Mostly, if you are not getting the response, probably this particular resource record is not available in there. You see here the test dot, right? Maybe I'm not getting the response. Probably this test resource record is not created in the respective authoritative name as servers. But how do I do some troubleshooting on that? So if you are using the Linux machines, there are some commands are available to get that information. ns lookup is the command which will help you to do the or checking the resolution. Let's say ns lookup dot www.cloudcourse.com. I want to know the information about this name. Hit enter, you will get the answer. You see, this answer is now, I mean to say, for this name, the answer is this one. Okay, that is how you can verify whether the resolution is happening or not, because you cannot validate that from the browser itself, guys. The web page is not loaded means there should be many reasons, right? The DNS issue could be, the security group port number could be, the service might be down, the server side the port is not reachable. There are many reasons, so we need to drill down one by one. So first, if I talk about the DNS related, you need to run this command to check this particular domain is now actually resoluting into IP or not. So this is the very best command. The other command that you can use is the dig command. Dig and give the name that you wanted to look for. Now it will give you more information about the DNS resolution, and you can see that the question section, this is the question that you have been asked, and you can see the answer section that, so this particular name is now resoluted into this IP. This is confirming that the DNS is working fine, and even you can see the time that it took to give the resolution here. Sometimes you get a thing that the website is loading very slowly. What could be the reason? Probably the DNS resolution happening very slowly. So you can even see how much time that it is taking to give you the resolution of this particular thing, right? So these are the two best commands, guys, to check for the DNS resolution is working or not. Now, if I go back to the AWS, these name servers are the standard predefined AWS managed name servers. It could be AWS or any other vendor again. Wherever you have the domain register, those guys will be managing them in the backend. You will not be getting the direct access on them. So answering to the question that I get it in the chat window, that how do I delete the name server? You cannot delete this name server, but you can delete the hosted zone if you want, just to avoid the billing when you are doing the practice. So this is the hosted zone I created. It is chargeable, right? So I can delete the hosted zone. So the hosted zone is deleted, but the name server is something we cannot do anything, as those are the managed services from the backend by the domain register. Cool, guys. I think this is giving you the clarification for all the questions that you have been asked or could be, right? So as a summary, we have spent time today to understand how do the web services will be accessible through the domain name, and how to manage the DNS, and few important terms like the domain register, authoritative name server, resource records, the record type A and the C name, and other things, right? So if you have any questions, please do let me know, or else we are good for today. And like if you wanted to register a domain by yourself to do this practice, you can search for the domain registrar who can help you with the cheap cost or maybe a less price. Maybe you can register there. Could be any basically. Okay. And I heard that there are vendors who are providing you the name server for free also. Maybe you can try it out that as well without you spending, because this is just a learning practice. I think if possible, I can look for the vendor who is helping you to get the free domain. Maybe I'll give that link later in the groups. Thank you.
Yeah, his CNAME can exist in DNS server.
So what does it mean by the CNAME exist in the DNS server? The CNAME, sorry, any resource record that you create will be stored in the name servers.
Okay, fine. We can create also a
Right.
number of servers?
No, what does it mean by number of servers?
They like
The
2 or
number of
more.
resource records?
Yes.
Mhm. Because when you say number
Yes,
of
resource record.
servers, yeah. So when you say number of servers, that will go to the EC2 server, right? That's the reason the term is very important, right? So yes, you can create as many number of resource records in the hosted zone as per the requirement. It can be a multiple A records, multiple CNAME records. As per the need, I can create them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, how it will be decided that how many domain name servers we need, like something.
So you mean to say how many name servers that we need for this domain? Like in this case, I have
Yes,
4 name
correct. Yes,
servers. Is that the question?
yes.
As I said, right, this is not something that you decide or you manage, right? So this is completely the responsible of the domain registrar, right? So in this case, AWS is maintaining 4 for best high availability. The GoDaddy is maintaining only 2. It's up to them how many and how they wanted to manage these name servers in the backend. We don't have a control on that.
So maybe depending on traffic they are managing or something like.
It's not depend upon the traffic, because if the traffic gets increases, right, they don't increase this. This is their standard structure. Okay, so irrespective of the traffic, right, yes, the AWS is maintaining 4 name servers, GoDaddy is maintaining 2 name servers. Maybe the other vendors may maintain a different number of the name servers. It's up to them based on their strategy.
APR. So one quick question here. So when DNS server can get us, like, do all the things for us, is it mandatory to have Route 53 service every time we register for DNS server?
That's what, right? So either you use the Route 53 or you use the GoDaddy or you use the other one. So one domain register is required for you to manage this public domain resolution. It could be any. The Route 53 is not a mandate, right? So here I'm showing the Route 53 because we will be mostly working in the Route 53 level in the AWS, but it could be any other as well, right? Even I have shown you that managing the resource records from the GoDaddy, right? So no matter where you are having your domain, so there you need to manage your resource records. But 90% mostly your records will be managing by the AWS Route 53 only, because the infrastructure is all in AWS. It's better to have the domain also in the AWS only for a better management. Thanks, guys, being on mute. Right now, Jabba, right? There is a lot of background noise from your side, I think so.
Hi Pierre, this is Satya. I have seen one more comment trace route in the Google when I'm searching for how to connect to the DNS server or routing. So can you please explain me trace route? So that is the command. So
Traceroute command
for
is
the
no way. Traceroute command is no way related to the DNS concept. The traceroute command is altogether totally different. That will be discussed during the networking sessions.
okay, okay, fine, thank you.
Right. So now answering to the Srinivas, right? Yes, you can. Let's say you know www.cloudcourse.com can point to one server. Test.cloudcourse.com can point to another server. Mail.cloudcourse.com can point to another server. It's up to you. You can create multiple A records. Every record can point to a different IP of the different EC2 server. So it's on all up to how you want to manage your business plans.
Hi team, I have a quick question regarding Route S3. So this Route S3, how many domains it will store at a time? Like, is there any particular size or it will store n number of domains?
So I think we have missed the limits concept in AWS, right? So not only Route 53, in AWS, everything what you do will have their own limits. So how many number of hosted zones that you can create, how many records that you can have in the each hosted zone, all these are having some limits as per the AWS. Whatever the limit that the AWS is set for us, we need to just follow that. And if we need to increase the limit, we need to raise a request with the AWS to increase the limit.
Hi Pierre, hello.
Hi Aditya.
Hello. Yeah. So my question is, what is the difference between alias record and NS record?
NS record?
Alias record.
Sorry, alias record and NS record?
No, one more record is there. I forgot that
CNAME
name.
record, right?
CNAME.
Correct?
Yeah, correct.
Mhm. I think we need to wait for some more days to get the answer for this. Okay. Outside of the AWS, alias, CNAME, both are same, right? Within the AWS, there is a slight difference between these two record types, alias and CNAME. I'll talk about this difference later. I think it takes some time to get into understand this question, guys. Okay, because I need to discuss something called load balancers to deal with this. As of now, park this. I'll definitely talk about these differences later. So answering to Heyman, yes, Route 53 is just like a GoDaddy, right? Which is just giving you the domain name resolutions.
So Pierre, in Route S3, you said that we can able to create the domain names, but it is chargeable, right?
Yes.
So we don't have any free to, free domain names that AWS is not providing. Is it any free domains AWS is providing?
You don't get that. What I said, right? Like you don't get the free domains. Why? This is not something related to the AWS. The domain, if you purchase a domain, pretty much the domain is blocked in the entire world. No one can take that name again, correct? Because of that uniqueness, this is something that you need to purchase. They cannot give you this as a free tier. What is the case if I get if I get it for free tier? If I go and take some 100 domains, the 100 names are blocked for you, right? The rest of the people cannot use that names in the world. So this is something cannot be given as a free tier.
Okay, so that's why you're using GoDaddy and getting some domain names and using.
Not that's why. Even in the GoDaddy, you need to purchase, right? I'm
Okay.
not getting it for free anywhere. So right. So even in GoDaddy, you need to purchase. Without you purchasing, you will not get a domain.
Okay.
Probably there are some vendors who can give you some subdomains just for practicing for free.
Okay. Okay. Okay, Priya.
Thank you. So probably I'll try to recommend some of the names, the domain registers where you can get the domains, but you can take one, not a problem. It will be very cheaper, right? Just a yearly cost. You can play around that. Even I would recommend that you can have your own domain name with your personal name, can maintain your own, the career profile as well in that domain. That is how you can, showcase your public facing information about your career as well, right? So there are many people who are, enthusiasm to do that, to maintain their own website, right? To keep their information. Uh-huh. So answering to the Java, right? That is not something related to the DNS at the moment. If you are having multiple web applications in the same server, the DNS is same, right? That is something that you need to manage in the server side. That is related to the Apache HTTPD web server configuration, which is called as a virtual hosting concept. But as of now, I am talking about this Apache HTTPD web server just to understand how the websites works. In real time, we don't use this Apache HTTP web server, guys. So we need not to focus much on this Apache HTTP web server configuration, the virtual hosting and all. So I think that's good enough for now. We don't use this no Apache HTTPD in real time. We will be using Tomcat. We'll go to that level later. So this is the the get start to understand the web services concept. Yeah, thanks for the answer, Rajesh. Yeah, that is true. So in the same server, I can have something called a tenancy concept, technically, which is called as a virtual hosting. There I can manage the multiple services. Great, guys. I think thanks for your time today, right? So start looking into these sessions and do the practice. We'll meet tomorrow again.
Yeah, hi PR, hello.
Yes, Aditya.
Uh, like you said, the DNS servers they resolve the name and two IP address. Uh, how this processes happen? Can you explain briefly?
Mm-hmm. So that is where you will be creating the. Now it's your requirement how to create a records. Let's say what I said, right? Maybe mail.cloudcoast.com is pointing to one IP. I'm just giving some dummy IPs here. What happened? That is it there already. Yeah, it's already there. That's why it is not taking. So create a record. Let's say test.cloudcoast.com pointing to a different IP pointing to different EC2 server altogether. Now you see the www.cloudcoast.com is pointing to one server, test.cloudcoast.com is pointing to another server. So it's up to you. You can create multiple records here pointing to different IPs with a different name, right?
Okay.
So Pierre, so here shall I create this device IP?
What is a device IP?
No. For our Windows, we have one. You said that one IP, right? Other than a DNS server, we have ISPs, right? Sorry, I forgot the name.
Mm-hmm.
We give that IP for our own systems. We have one IP address, right? Shall I give that IP address here?
Why? What is the use case? So when you are doing something, we need to have the use case, right? What is the purpose to give your laptop IP address here? What is that you are trying to achieve?
Instead of giving a random IP, I just want to give the my system IP address. That's it. There is no use case.
So here I given the random IP to explain the concept that it is possible to create multiple A records pointing to different IPs. So either I give the random IP or I give the real IP of my laptop. What is the use? So this is just understanding the concept, right?
Okay.
So that IP is basically where my website is running. Okay, this could be any IP where my website is running. If you think that your website is hosted on your laptop, you keep your laptop IP. If you think that your website is hosted on a different EC2 server, keep that IP address here. So I just given some random IP because the concept, the answer is all about how do I create multiple A records. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, team.